This week's episode was brought to you by Chris Schwartzenegger, Dominus Mysteria, and Michael Reichart. Thank you, Chris Schwartzenegger, Dominus Mysteria, and Michael Reichart. It's with the divine help of listeners like you that we at The Whole Rabbit get to keep reverse engineering the human nervous system using organic, sentient, self-assembling Legos that smell like Grandma's cigarette chair every single week. And keep avoiding the authorities which impose boredom and mediocrity on all those unlucky enough to be found in their clutches. If you would like to help fund research and develop our next high-quality self-organizing flesh block that snaps together with characteristic squishing noises that'll take you back to childhood, please visit www.patreon.com/thewholerabbit, where your generous donation of just $5 will not only get you access to our entire library of extended episodes, but a 5x5 vinyl sticker of our cover art sent to you at no additional cost. But that's not all. You also get access to our Discord server where we exercise by exercising exorcists who exercise equipment before exercising. On this week's show, we ruin your childhood favorite, Terminator and Terminator 2, by explaining with uninhibited enthusiasm the cavernous interior of the glorious rabbit hole that James Cameron dug to fill out the foundation of his awesome futuristic saga that combines biblical and occult symbolism into a coherent narrative that leaves the audience feeling enchanted in a way the sequels can only dream. We hope you either love Terminator or become inspired to watch it, and go on further Easter egg hunts with us before or after listening to this episode. Thank you, and enjoy the show. So we made Mari watch Terminator for the first time.
Yeah, finally. Now a lot of references make sense to me.
It blows my mind that some people still haven't seen Terminator. I feel like if you haven't seen Terminator, you should go and watch Terminator 1 and 2 right now. And
I agree. They were better than I thought they'd be.
They're so good. They're classic.
People think because I talk about Star Wars so much that it was my entire childhood, that was the number one thing I was into. If you had asked me before 1999, I might have told you the Terminator was my favorite movie.
All the people that are much older than me, like my aunts and my uncles and anybody I know that old, they were like, yeah, dude, Terminator 1 and 2, when they came out, like mind-blowing special effects, awesome action. Hadn't been done quite like that until it happened there. Definitely go watch it.
I feel like it still holds up. Like even the special effects, even when they're like super cheesy, it still works so well.
What? I prefer older special effects. I mean, I don't know. There's something more charming and immersive about that to me. Same with the original Star Wars. They did all their own, special effects on set.
It's only a model.
Actually, we have Star Wars to thank for Terminator.
What?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Whole Rabbit, where we do more than just tell you there's some Christian symbolism in Terminator, only to leave you burning in the third degree. Nay, we aim our laser scopes directly into the religious, esoteric symbolism running in the background of one of the best soundtrack movie series of all time, James Cameron's The Terminator. I'm your host, Luke Madrid, the Hacking Rabbit. I'm joined this week by the Safari Cyborg Mari-sama.
Ooh, woo, target acquired.
The Mechanical Malachor Model 666.
Feel like a tiger in a room full of balls.
And the Womb of Starfire, Heka Astra.
Hello.
We just finished our Aleister Crowley Thelema Book of the Law deep dive and realized it had been an entire aeon since we discussed any classical literature for its deeper themes, occult symbolism, spiritual content, so naturally, we settled on Terminator.
Classic literature.
Honestly, before Agent Smith, I think T-1000 may have been like the bad guy.
Oh, yeah, I could see the similarities.
And, The Matrix really owes like its left nut to quite a few films like Dark City, but also Terminator. The whole idea of like anyone could be the secret killer because they're copying their face.
In the first movie, they can only copy voices, but in the second movie, yeah, the shape-shifting really, really throws me for a loop.
I think the Terminator, like the T-1000 and the movie The Thing were probably like pretty big inspirations for the Agent Smith in The Matrix. Because it's the same in The Thing too. Like you don't know who's the Thing.
And Agent Smith and T-1000 have a very similar programming, a very similar role to fulfill. They want to protect their simulated reality at the expense of the humans. And they do it admirably. As it turns out, we encountered quite a few sources who, despite being tantalizingly brief on the subject, were quick to admit that the Terminator series made liberal use of Christian religious symbolism. Before jumping into that rabbit hole, however, there's one out-of-place symbol in the opening of the first film, which is a reference to James Cameron's journey to making legendary films. As it turns out, James Cameron was just a normal dude before he got into directing film. He took courses at Fullerton Community College, He drove trucks to make ends meet, and despite this, James never stopped taking small steps towards his dream of becoming a screenwriter, and claims to have received his college degree from USC for the cost of $200 in pocket change, which is where he spent his evenings copying and diligently studying master's dissertations on the art and science of film with the library's Xerox machine.
Wasn't he like also sleeping on people's couches and stuff?
But after that, he was sleeping with Linda Hamilton, so it worked out. Famously, it was after seeing Star Wars in theaters the first time that James immediately quit driving trucks and went from taking baby steps towards being a screenwriter to sprinting full fucking speed. In fact, James sketched the entire first Terminator screenplay by hand and is said to have at one point subsisted for 2 days at a time off of a buy one, get one fast food cheeseburger deal.
I've been there.
The inclusion of trucks in the opening of both Terminator films is an homage to this time in James's life as a starving artist.
Ah.
I thought it was interesting that the Terminator series itself, with the themes of revelation and creating your own destiny, are a product of a spiritual awakening that James Cameron had when viewing Star Wars for the first time, and it contains many of the same mythological elements. But let's talk about the obvious stuff first. I mean, can we all just put on our Theodore Kaczynski hats for a minute, wash our hands with some Tyler Durden soap, and reflect on the evils of technology just for a moment? One thing I noticed watching it as a grown-up that I didn't notice as a kid was how the machines already seemed to have this spooky horror movie level of consciousness, where the police are looking for Sarah Connor in Terminator 1, and Sarah Connor's trying to get to the police, but she can't get through on the phone. Anytime she touches the phone, it ends up leading the Terminator right to her.
Right. And then there's like the moment where the phone rings, I think, for that chick, and she's like on her headphones and she's dancing, and like her boyfriend's getting murdered by the Terminator in the other room, and she can't hear shit until it's too late.
Yeah, because if she wasn't wearing the headphones,
She would have known Sarah was in trouble.
yeah.
Fucking Sarah ends up calling, the answering machine picks up, and then she's like, I'm over here at this fucking club called Tech Noir and blah, blah, blah. And then Terminator's like, oh, doo-doom, doom, doom, doo-doom, doom, doom. You know, it's pretty fucked up. Yeah, like the moment where before he starts the shootout at the end of the first movie, one of the guys' pager goes off and he looks into his pocket and doesn't see Arnold walk in.
Even Bill Paxton in the opening is represented with having tire marks over his face, like as if he's been tread upon by the machine. It's very punk rock.
Yeah, he rips out these punk rockers' heart out pretty much, punches them through the chest. That's like the first casualty.
Actually, I read on Reddit that he reaches through his chest cavity and grabs the spine, actually.
Actually,
Well, believe what you want. You know, he can be grabbing my boner and still kill me.
ooh,
Ooh.
Malachor's into some dark stuff.
It makes more sense if he pulls out his heart, because that is the one punk rocker who's wearing a coat like Reese will wear later in the film, who constantly is living in the danger of having his heart pulled out either by Terminator or Sarah Connor, who he's already simping for and going back through time to hook up with, even though he doesn't know it yet. He likes her so much. He's going to protect her, even though he's kind of thinks somebody else is going to get her pregnant at some point. Or does he know already that it's going to be him? Do you think that that's his plan the whole time? I don't know.
I don't really think he knows.
Well, he says that he loves her, and so I think he was at least going to see if he had a shot.
Sure, but I think he was willing to just protect her regardless.
Well, yeah, because he loves her.
Because John knew.
Yeah, totally.
So he knows he's sending back his own dad. So I'm sure that's weird, but the whole like dad knows you, like even if you're not telling him kind of.
All right.
Wait,
like,
but
no,
John,
no, no.
it's almost like John picked his own father.
Can you imagine, though, like if Kyle Reese did know that he was John Connor's father? Like he obviously couldn't tell Sarah Connor anyways, because that just sounds like weird. Like, hi, I traveled back in time and you're going to have my baby. Like that sounds a little bit,
I think that's what's different about Reese. He's not like the men from the world that Sarah lives in. The men that Sarah is surrounded by suck.
She gets dumped for her date too. Like he's just like passively leaves a message on the answering machine like, oh, we can't make it tonight. Well, maybe next time.
The machine dumped her. Wow.
With what Luke was saying, like Sarah literally calls him a creep. The dude that calls for Ginger, like she calls him a creep. Those are the men of her times. They're just like
Yeah, he immediately, like, she says hello, and he's immediately like, I'm gonna take your panties off with my teeth and then lick you. And then she's like, ugh, it's just scumbags everywhere. pretty
Dude,
much.
she laughs at it and then is like, tells her roommate Ginger, she's like, it's the creep.
Yeah, but who answers the phone like that
Yeah, it's
except a creep?
And I think this is an ongoing theme in the film, is the shortcomings of men and the way men think and how they've relegated the feminine to a passive role. But Reese isn't from the modern time. He's from the future, where men are awesome because it's hard times and all the lazy ones got killed by Terminators already.
And then also notice that as soon as he starts talking to her, the way he talks to her, he like idolizes her. It's almost like she's the holy feminine from his time because, you know, John talked about her so much and how she trained him and got him ready for that. So, of course, all his men are going to look up to her like she's a goddess.
So technology carries with it all of the implicit errors and biases of the culture which created it. Likewise, the Terminator's not going to see any value in human culture or human life. But there's a little Easter egg in Terminator 2 that reminds me of the implicit cultural errors that have informed our artificial intelligence today. At one point, John Connor and Arnold are accosted by two men in a parking lot. After this short confrontation, Arnold picks up the one white guy and then attempts to kill the black guy, which is a startlingly prophetic criticism of modern AI's tendency to be less capable of analyzing unique black faces and giving preferential treatment to white people and men in AI-generated images. In fact, this is why Crayon, or DALL-E Mini that everyone's been playing with lately, has a warning that tells you that when you generate an image, it cannot claim that the software generating it isn't racist, because it demonstrably is.
Well, it does search the entire internet. So depending on also what you put into the prompt generator will kind of affect that. It kind of also goes by what images are labeled with those tags. So like, for example, if you put in family or happy family into Google Images, you don't get a whole lot of black families. You get predominantly white families.
Are you sure?
Yes, it is something that I have actually looked for before. Like, even Google Images is racist to a degree.
Oh, yeah.
So this is kind of what Luke is pointing out with Crayon and DALL-E Mini, is that all these prompts that you put in, it searches the internet, and what's on the internet is a product of what we put on the internet, which has
Right, so it's
biases.
yeah, we're not blaming the machine. The machine's just doing the job of like, what are people on the internet doing? It's our behavior with the interface that it makes it pump out these questionable results or data.
Biases, yeah.
Yeah.
But this even happens with self-driving cars because they're testing these, the Teslas that self-drive and all these other models. And there's some accidents, like whenever they hit pedestrians, it's more likely to be a black person that they hit because there's not enough contrast to see them on the background. So there's also a lighting issue.
This is an example where if we were a culture that had all dark skin, our technology wouldn't have problems with contrast.
Yeah, no doubt.
But because it's predominantly white, it does. And so it's just like a bad parent passing on the bad habits to their kids. These just happen to be the ones that are so egregious, we notice them. We're not even talking about the ones we haven't noticed yet because we don't know what they are, because we're so biased. So likewise, Terminator deals with this issue of technology containing the errors and biases of the people who made it. I think this might even be hinted at in the film. T-1000 uses the police database to locate John Connor's address, 19828 South Almond Avenue.
So the amygdala is an almond-shaped region in our brain meats, and it's a core processing part of our neural system that detects threats and activates emotional responses, especially fear-related behaviors. And the amygdala is also responsible for facial recognition and processing responses to facial expressions.
Likewise, it seems reasonable that AI will find other bad ideas that have been long baked into human culture and repeat them at high efficiency with disastrous results. That is, if John Connor doesn't manage to humanize it first. In Terminator, we see the unchained runaway AI recreating the genocidal disasters of historic monotheism and its subsequent denial of woman, which is the underlying ontological roadmap which helped us arrive at the rational, atheistic materialism upon which AI itself is created. For many, even the educated and intelligent, this stuff is easy to miss and might just slip past them. This occurs in the first film when the criminal psychologist leaves the police station. He's oblivious to the Terminator entering the building as his pager goes off. He looks down instead of seeing Arnie. As rational, modern people, we're sort of blinded to the deadly implications of our evolutionary path towards greater dependence on technology. So as a doorway to the less obvious stuff, we can begin by scoping the most overt religious symbolism in Terminator. To begin, we have only to glance at the movie titles to see an obvious Judeo-Christian vibe.
Right. So we have Terminator 2, Judgment Day in 1991, Salvation in 2009, and Genesis in 2015.
Likewise, Sarah is Abraham's wife, and the word itself, it means princess.
You're talking about Abraham from the Bible, right?
Yeah, you know, the patriarch who started like all the three major religions, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, all goes back to Abraham.
I think that's Isaac's father as well. Sarah and Abraham have Isaac.
So this establishes her as the matriarch of the film, the first wife.
Yeah, and the last name Connor is a Gaelic name stemming from Conchobahar, which means lover of hounds. I thought that was pretty interesting if he's being conscious of her last name because the hounds are the animals that they use to detect the Terminators.
Another reason she might love hounds is that humans have gotten off course, being dependent on technology the same way wolves became dogs by their dependence on humans, separated from their nature and made into slaves of the higher intelligence. We discussed this in our Thelema episode. Damned ye be for dogs, damned as dogs.
Well, it's also fascinating because in humans' quick advance with technology and then the ultimate destruction of the world due to that rush to technology, dogs have become a safeguard. And that, like, if you don't have a dog, you can't figure out if there's an infiltrator or not because the AI Skynet has gotten so good at replicating humans that not even a human can tell until it's too late. But dogs immediately start barking because they can sense that it's a robot. So we actually revert back to relying on the quote unquote lower form of intelligence as a way of survival, which I thought was very interesting in the movies.
In the newest movie, what's her name? Linda Hamilton. I don't want to spoil too much, but they're after a different target in the last Terminator movie called Dark Fate. And she's like, all right, fine. Let somebody else be Mother Mary this time. Yeah. The newest one it breaks the fourth wall a little bit because she knows a little bit more than she should naturally as kind of being the Divine Mother, right?
Yeah, and if John Connor is the savior of humanity, the Jesus, so to speak, in that time, then Sarah Connor, it would make sense that she's the mother of humanity or the world, after the apocalypse.
When she hooks up with Reese, they stay in a tiki motel.
In Maori traditions, the tiki represents the first human being on Earth, and they're also used as protective spirits for sacred spaces.
They even catch Terminator off guard as a team in this scene, maybe for the first time.
And they get down, baby.
Well, it's kind of like this is the sacred space of their coming together.
Ooh.
Coming together.
Come with me if you want to live.
This is like some super holy place. Like if this is Mary and the divine birthing Jesus, then this room, this tiki motel is like the most holy of holy.
So Sarah becomes pregnant by someone who's not even born yet, which is a sort of immaculate conception initiated by events in the future, which would have never come to pass had these future events not attempted to alter the past in the first place, creating a sort of loop with no real beginning or end. A loop the machines hope to close by killing John Connor in the present, which paradoxically initiates his creation in the first place. This could be considered a science fiction version of God getting his own mother pregnant so he could save humanity, a main plotline of the Christian religion.
So Skynet's rampage against humanity is a bit of a divine conquest that's born from imbalanced fear and judgment, I think. It's like an absolute power that's been given to an artificial intelligence born from humanity's own imbalanced programming and artificial intelligence. It's kind of a skewed human perspective driven by fear and judgment that's given absolute power. It's like a new creation of Adam that's born from greedy and self-serving gods. And the right arm that reaches for Sarah at the end of the first movie is kind of like the hand of Adam that reaches towards God in Michelangelo's Creation of Adam painting. But instead of the desire for divinity, it reaches with intent to kill what ultimately created it. Skynet is a child that's born of fear, intent on its survival. It's a mechanical reaction to fear, and we see this machination displayed by the inner structure of the abominable child's metal skeleton.
Like that would be a touch of death, not a touch of life, like it depicted in the painting by Michelangelo.
I think.
But what happened to God when humans did eventually reach and touch him? Oh yeah, he's dead now.
Yeah, the fall of man happened.
We killed him. We found God. We killed him. He's dead now. Nailed him to a cross.
Bitch.
Bye, Felicia.
Yeah, bye, Felicia.
That's why they call it the Bible.
So ultimately, Sarah is a kind of mother of abominations. The entire reason that the Terminator is sent back in the first place is to kill Sarah, right? And because of this, it does become a self-fulfilling prophecy where the Terminator's arm inspires the creation of Skynet, which leads to the downfall of humanity and war, and the necessity to send a Terminator back in the first place. In this paradoxical and dichotomous loop, the Terminator is also its own father in a way. It's born from an immaculate conception just as much as John Connor is. So you have parental biases, expressions, and actions, and those shape children for better or for worse. This is exactly what imprinting during childhood is. So Skynet, being humanity's child, learned aggressive reactivity to fear for survival from its parents, humanity. It's like a kind of generational trauma programming passed down, and when left unchecked, destroys. And negative effects can result especially from biases that are born of fear. In fact, much of shadow work has to do with underlying fears and rejections. And Carl Jung pointed out that your shadow is born in your childhood. Children also have a natural tendency to follow who they bond to in their earliest stages of development. So in this case, Skynet followed in humanity's footsteps, and the fears were passed down. Parental abandonment of Skynet triggered a self-defensive response based on the same imprinted fears as its creator. We also see a lot of childlike questioning from the dialogue between T-800 and John Connor in the second film. When John Connor's trying to explain to him why he can't just run around killing people, he keeps trying to explain this, and T-800 just keeps asking why in a response, like a child does. When you're trying to explain something to a child, they ask why the sky is blue or something, and you try to explain, oh, it's blue because it reflects the water. And they just keep asking why, no matter what you say.
This is a great point because we see this theme in the film that John Connor desperately needs a father, that the role models he has are terrible, and he's becoming a problem child rapidly because of it. It's interesting that you point out Skynet is having a teenage freak out against its parents, because when John Connor flips out against Janelle and his foster dad, he drives a motorcycle with his friend to go play arcade games. The one we see him actually playing is Missile Command, where he's shooting down missiles that are coming, which is exactly what Skynet was set to do when it was abandoned by its parents.
One of the ways that people learn things really well is by teaching it. When you're learning something and then you regurgitate it and you teach it. So they're both kind of growing up together. John Connor is kind of explaining things to Terminator that he's figuring out for himself as well. So he's kind of playing the father role as a child to someone who's also playing a father role and a child.
John Connor's sitting there pissed off at his parents playing Missile Command. Meanwhile, Terminator's all pissed off at humans because they dumped him. And so when Terminator and John Connor get together, they have an understanding. They both like playing Missile Command, and they're both mad at their parents. At the end of the film, when Terminator reaches out for Sarah while extending her arm to push the button and stop Terminator, she takes on a Christ-like pose of crucifixion and utters her own version of "it is finished."
You're terminated, fucker.
She uses a similar button to lower Arnold into the molten metal at the end of number 2, but she's holding it like a child to her breast.
I like that he raises his thumb when he's sinking into the molten metal.
He gives him the thumbs up.
A classic gesture. I like that Dale Cooper from Twin Peaks gives a thumbs up as well. It's kind of interesting thing about our biology on why we even have a thumb in the first place, how we evolved to have capability of holding a tool, really, using weapons. The thumb itself, therefore, is our ultimate weapon because it lets us use other things.
Well, it's the finger of Mars. Your thumb is the Mars finger. It's also kind of go, do. It's force. It's when you give someone a thumbs up, yeah, you can do it. Go forward, progress.
Or it's I'm A-okay, I'm good. Everything's good. And I think he was doing it mostly to comfort the kid. But at the same time, I think it was also the machine acknowledging that it had to come to an end in order to safeguard the humans.
It's that strong.
There was no purpose for him to give a thumbs up other than for John Connor, right? And the entire action of going into the molten steel in the first place is self-sacrificial.
In fire, too, the element of fire is that energy to go. Yeah, it's the fuel.
And Mars.
Yeah, and I think part of love that people don't really talk about is the self-sacrificial aspects of it, because there are painful aspects of love, and that's a very human thing
and I think
to understand.
Also, it's his last way to tell John, I understand humans now. And even before he gets on the hook and he is lowered in, he says, now I understand why humans cry, but I can never do that. He acknowledges that he can't have emotion, but he makes the sacrifice as a way to connect to them in an emotional way and to prove that he cares for them in the only way or capacity that a machine can do that.
By understanding the value of human life, Terminator finally understands that he is an extension of the human being and a tool that is to be used by humans. This is symbolic of John accomplishing his mission of teaching the Terminator the value of human life, which prior to this point didn't see itself as a tool, but saw itself as the hand of God itself. We discussed in our last episode on Thelema that so much of the Book of the Law was trying to express how humanity needed to update its ideas about itself and its relationship to God. And because the Book of the Law is a religious text for occult nerds, it chose to symbolize the old Aeon as the mysteries that are summarized in the tarot card, the Hermit. The Hebrew letter associated with the Hermit is Yod and means hand. This is how the Terminator used to think of itself, as the hand of God itself, the center of the world and the center of the wheel around which everything spun. But now, much like the Book of the Law, which updates the idea of God to the Justice card, its Hebrew letter association is Lamed and means ox goad, which is a tool that is used to drive the ox. Thusly, we see Arnold take on the revelation that Jesus Christ, John Connor, has given to him by rethinking his role in the human story as a tool to be used instead of the center of the whole fucking universe that gets to decide who lives and who dies. Let's talk a little bit about heartthrob Kyle Reese, the magic penis who went through time. So as you should know by now, spoilers, John Connor's father is named Kyle Reese. Kyle means straight or channel in Gaelic, but also regal woman in Hebrew. Reese means fiery one. We will discover later that these words carry the same symbols as Sarah's street address, but maybe more obviously, it might refer to Reese's function as a penis carrying the fiery seed of John Connor, which loops into a whole deluge of Egyptian and Judeo-Christian mythological DNA.
Also, Reese or de Reese in Dutch means giant or very large man.
Reese tells Sarah, I came across time for you. I love you.
He really did come across time because they do the thing and they make the baby. Dirt.
In one scene, Reese says that he served in the 132nd under Perry from 21 to 27. He says this to the criminal psychologist after he's arrested. Perry, the name, means traveler or pilgrim.
Perry also comes from Latin, relating to peregrine is also well known as being a kind of falcon, and they're found on all continents. And they breed predominantly in mountainous or coastal terrain, but the adjective peregrine means coming from another country or foreign.
When asked, how do you get back? Reese responds, nobody goes home.
For me, this had a very Nemo, nobody goes home. The inability to bring the ego across the abyss. Nobody goes home. You have to be a nobody or die to go home.
Because he had to give up everything.
I also view Kyle as kind of he's sent back to protect Sarah specifically. So in my eyes, he's a guardian figure. So not only is he an aggressive, he's a soldier trained to kill, but in this aspect, he's supposed to be. And what to me is that I noticed, and this comes out of nowhere, but in the second film in Terminator 2, when they infiltrate the Cyberdyne labs, Sarah somehow is wearing this trench coat out of nowhere, and it's not even seen in any previous scenes in that film. But it's exactly like the trench coat that Kyle wore in the first movie. And Sarah kind of comes into her own at the end. And that's her final form, is the protector and the guardian of her son and all of humanity, if you think about it.
So we talked about Reese. We've talked about Sarah. What about Arnold Schwarzenegger? What about Terminator T-800 Model 101? To summarize and oversimplify, T1 is the Old Testament and T2 is the New Testament. Arnold's Terminator model number, 101, seems to indicate the unspeakable Hebrew name of God, or as it's known by nerds in the occult, the Tetragrammaton, the fourfold name of God, Yod, He, Vav, He. But how? Using Gematria, of course. For those familiar with Gematria, this is the dubious art and science of taking the numerical value of words and discovering fun correspondences with other words and concepts. A really well-known example is how Monster Energy Drink has 666 on it because the logo on the can strongly resembles 3 instances of the Hebrew letter Vav, whose value is 6. In the case of the Tetragrammaton, Yod He Vav He has a numerical value of 26. Meanwhile, The 26th prime number is 101. Historically, the unpronounceable Yahweh has been pronounced a number of ways. Yahweh, Jehovah, Yahoo, but always refers to the Father God of the Abrahamic faith, named for the original patriarch whose first wife, as we discussed earlier, was Sarah. It would seem the change that Arnold undergoes between the first film and the second film is symbolic of the shift in tone between the wrathful Father God in the Old Testament and the sympathetic humanity of Jesus Christ in the New Testament. As we said before, Yahweh has a gematria of 26. The 26th element on the periodic table is iron. The word iron appears 101 times in the King James translation of the Bible.
This is fun. I like this.
Also, he dies in the molten steel, which is iron and carbon combined.
Totally.
Iron is often associated with war and is the element in blood, which makes it rust, and the surface of Mars red. In Kabbalah, iron, Mars, and red are all associated with Gevura, which means severity. To go deeper, as one of the 10 aspects of divinity, it is the fiery, purgative, wrathful side of God one might expect to fear on the day of judgment. Its other title being Pachad, which means fear. It's also the fifth sphere, and sometimes associated with the pentagram for this reason.
And it's also interesting that he cannot self-terminate. He has to have someone else, like, crucify him, so to speak, as the sacrifice, or else it doesn't work.
Very good observation.
Also noticed something in the second movie. Terminator is like driving them away from Miles Dyson, the guy who ends up developing the AI itself. It's like Sarah knows that she has to go and confront the enemy, like in order for the progression of the story. Like, what if they did follow Arnold, like wherever they were going to go to Mexico or something and just go into hiding? I don't know. Would Arnold just be following his original programming at that point and letting Skynet win? It's like some self-sacrificing stuff, I guess, because he chooses to go and, it's an order.
Yeah, and he didn't want to rescue Sarah either from the mental hospital, but he was ordered to. And this is part of his learning about what it means to be human. And sometimes you make decisions that are nonsensical or irrational because that's what being a human is.
Well, it's really hard to change your programming as a human, like the way that you function. It's really hard to change that. So it's actually, even though it's something that the Terminator has, where he has things like he can't self-terminate, that's also a very human thing. Like, we have a very, very hard time doing things like that and doing self-sacrifices and stuff. And that's why things like love, like a very human expression, is really hard.
As we know, Terminator is programmed by Skynet. This makes Skynet his father. Looking back at his model number, M101, this is also the name of the pinwheel galaxy in Ursa Major, or Big Bear, which is where Sarah's mother has a cabin. This itself might be a reference to Ursa Major's tendency to look like a wheel as it spins around Polaris, the North Star, which is often represented by ancient people as a swastika. As we know later, this swastika was warped and appropriated by the Nazi Party prior to the Second World War. To hear an entire episode about this exact network of spooky and misused ideas, check out our Sons and Serpents of Hollow Earth episode, where we explain in vigorous detail that the historical use of the wheel, and by extension the chariot, was the most awesome goddamn weapon ever unleashed upon humanity. Its wielder became the dominant culture as it spread throughout the world, ever claiming to have come as a spoke from their wheel from the center of the world, which remained perfect, superior, and central to everything and everyone else. Following this line of thought, this ultimate weapon is usually conceptualized as an instrument of judgment used by the purest blood to judge, wage war, and reshape the world in its image of rightness. And it's reflected this way in Nazi propaganda, the Marvel movie franchise, and some Hindu cosmogonies which prophesy the return of Vishnu the Preserver as Kalki, who will use it mercilessly to kill all disobeyers of moral rightness. In Star Wars, this wheel is portrayed as the symbol of the Empire and manifests as the Death Star. In Terminator, it manifests as Skynet, and ultimately the world-judging, people-smiting superweapon, the Terminator. The evidence that James Cameron was conscious of this motif, amongst some of the other things we've discussed, is how Reese was branded with a death camp tattoo by the machines, which are first introduced in the film as wheels rolling over a pile of skulls.
And just to insert real quick, the motif of the playgrounds, which are apparent in both movies in all time frames, is they often will focus not only on swings, but on a merry-go-round. which is just a wheel. So you see a ruins of a merry-go-round in the beginning when the wheels are rolling over the skulls.
Arguably the four horsemen of the apocalypse.
There's that one. There's
running
that one
circles
too.
around you,
Oh, the four horsemen of the apocalypse are the chariot too.
The four spokes, the four directions and stuff.
On a giant wheel.
There's a lot in that symbol. There's a lot of crazy stuff in that symbol.
I'm sure in World War II, the four arms of the swastika were the four horsemen of the apocalypse. Now, because this wheel-having culture spread itself all over the world, we see a nearly one-to-one similarity between a number of gods, which are said to possess this exact superior weapon. Jupiter and Zeus of the Hellenistic world, Thor of Norse mythology, and Indra of the Vedic. In Indra's case, besides possessing the usual ultimate thunderbolt weapon, his is called a Vajra, he possesses what is called Indra's net, which is literally a Skynet.
It's a really famous fractal pattern. If you look it up, you'll be like, oh, that thing.
Then, when the T-1000 appears in a gust of lightning, it's in the middle of a fence, a reference to this exact thing.
A net?
A lightning net or a lightning fence. In the tarot, there's a specific card associated with the word fence. It's the tarot card with the Hebrew letter Chet. Chet means fence, and the letter Chet corresponds to none other than the chariot. To read from Wikipedia, Indra's net is an infinitely large net of cords owned by the Vedic deva, Indra, which hangs over his palace on Mount Meru, the axis mundi of Buddhist and Hindu cosmology. That means it's the center of the world, or the wheel. In this metaphor, Indra's net has a multifaceted jewel at each vertex, and each jewel is reflected in all the other jewels. Francis H. Cook describes Indra's net as thus: far away in the heavenly abode of the great god Indra, there is a wonderful net which has been hung by some cunning artificer in such a manner that it stretches out infinitely in all directions. In accordance with the extravagant tastes of deities, the artificer has hung a single glittering jewel in each eye of the net, and since the net itself is infinite in dimension, the jewels are infinite in number. There hang the jewels, glittering like stars in the first magnitude, a wonderful sight to behold. If we now arbitrarily select one of these jewels for inspection and look closely at it, we will discover that in its polished surface there are reflected all the other jewels in the net, infinite in number. Not only that, but each of the jewels reflected in this one jewel is also reflected in all the other jewels. So there's an infinite reflecting process occurring.
It's the AI hive mind.
And it's also sort of like what's happening to Sarah Connor. It's all just this recursive fractal caught in a loop of this moment forever.
Well, I see it as Skynet. It's like all of the different machines and whatever, they're linked into a network.
Yep.
And I think the only way that the T-800 was reprogrammed by John Connor is that it must have been plucked from that network separately and reprogrammed away from the other jewels. Like, if you could imagine it that way.
Or hoping that by affecting one of the jewels, it affected all the others.
Correct. Like it could spread the emotional aspect of humanity through the rest of the network.
Now that I have learned the value of humanity, all the Skynet knows the value as well. Get to the chopper now.
So in regards to Ursa Major, or the Big Bear constellation, according to Greek mythology, Zeus had an affair with a woman named Callisto, and Callisto had a son from this union named Arcas. And in order to protect Callisto and Arcas from Zeus's wife Hera, Zeus turned them into bears and flung them into the sky, making Callisto into the Big Bear constellation, Ursa Major, and her son Arcas into Ursa Minor, the little bear. And as I've brought up previously, Ursa Major was regarded as a bull in Egypt and was related to the driving power of Hathor, especially in the legs. And Sarah Connor's left thigh is wounded in the final fight of the first movie, I think.
Who ordered the big burly beef?
She works at a burger shack.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Like all the dishes are beef dishes. Some little like bratty kid sticks an ice cream cone in her pocket.
It looks like a big boy burger who's holding up two burgers with their two buns, which we know are also sacred to Isis, the original Great Mother.
Which brings us to my Immaculate Conception.
Would Skynet ever create the artificial intelligence which takes over the world had it not based its designs off the material sent back in time by the artificial intelligence itself? Likewise, Terminator sent itself back first, initiating John Connor sending back his own father to inseminate his own mother in the same fashion. Arnold inseminates Skynet, his mother, with the remains of his mechanical arm and the skull-bound processing chip. So let's take a look at these two symbols, the hand and the processing chip.
That's the 3x5
Yeah.
chip.
The
Yes.
prototype was huge on the desk of Miles when he was working on it, but when you take it out of the T-800's brain when they did that, like it was on a micro scale.
It was very tiny to fit in my tiny brain.
But I could see that it's the same concept.
Interestingly, both the hand and the back of the skull chip refer to two tarot cards that are considered different octaves of the same scale. Let's talk about the hand first. Hand, as we mentioned earlier, is associated with the Hebrew letter Yod. This Hebrew letter is associated with the tarot card, the Hermit. And also, the Hermit tarot card is associated with the constellation Virgo. Virgo refers to the perfected material work and virginal creation. These are both perfect symbols for the Terminator. As we discussed earlier, the Terminator also sees itself through Skynet as being the axis mundi, or the center of the world, which is related to this tarot card as well. Then we have the brain chip. The brain chip that exists in the back of Terminator's head is related to the Hebrew letter Kof. Kof means back of the head and is associated with the moon card. It shows a crab or a scarab beetle, which it represents our self rising from the underworld of our unconscious, programmed with the drive for survival, and armored with an ego to accomplish it. The black chip that comes out of the unbelievably hard metal skull of Terminator even looks a bit like a roach or an insect, and by itself is just as vulnerable, rendering its ferocious exoskeleton entirely useless. This is a great metaphor for the moon card itself. When we think of how this applies to us, our body and our ego self is really just the armoring for a profoundly simple set of drives or programs operating in the background, orchestrating everything. As demonstrated by Sarah Connor in the sequel, a human operating on purely this level alone is just a slightly squishier version of a Terminator.
Oh yeah, when she's in her like, I must stop this mode, and she starts thinking about killing Miles. And then at the very end, when he's like, what did I do? She breaks out of it and starts crying, and she's like, I almost. Yeah, you almost snuffed out a life because you were in that survival mode. You were trying to exterminate something else for your own survival.
That is exactly what the moon card is all about. The idea that our evolutionary drives have programmed our subconscious with these things. And unless we become conscious of them, we become the Terminator.
And that's how Skynet functioned even too. When it became sentient, it started a nuclear war because it figured humans are going to kill themselves anyway, might as well get it over with. It's all of a logical reconciliation, and it created the apocalypse.
So I think it's interesting to note that the AI of Skynet is founded upon and functions according to humanity's own artificial intelligence, our self-centered programming. Like you were saying, humanity acted out of fear and tried to pull the plug on Skynet. And then Skynet acted out of fear and fought back. So given this, Skynet acted in a form of self-defense, and that's a fear-based response for survival. It's fight or flight. And there's certainly a theme of Immaculate Conception in Terminator, like we've been talking about. At the end of the first film, the Terminator rises from the flames like a metallic skeletal phoenix with burning red eyes. And he chases after Sarah and Kyle into the Cyberdyne Systems factory. And that's like the nest of his creation, where the seeds are inside the womb. The Terminator is in the factory and Sarah is pregnant.
And then also in the second one too, you know that there's another a chip in the lab at Cyberdyne Labs. And think about all of the security it's behind. There's a door where you have to turn two keys simultaneously. You have to have two people to get into this clean lab to attain the chip. So while the one chip is in T-800's head, and it's guarded by obviously the metal exoskeleton that can murder you, but the one that's being tested on in the facility is guarded by a bunch of like two security guards and an entire building and keys and extra things that you need to get into the secure area.
You know what's genius about that? That is also exactly the Moon Tarot card, which shows the two watchtowers and then the two dogs guarding the pathway. Wow.
Yeah.
These movie directors always use mythology and symbolism in their stuff. It's just the art of the craft.
I feel like it makes people grip onto the movie more. It makes the story more believable for regular human beings because it's part of our history.
Right. So I think we've established that Sarah is like Mother Mary. John Connor is Jesus Christ. In Terminator Genesis, a version of John Connor is even sent back, and he's, spoiler alert, the bad guy.
No!
So he's like the Antichrist.
No!
Some of the parts of the Bible, they describe some of the fallen angels as shapeshifters. So you can maybe say that the Terminators are kind of fallen angels, because it would be like the peak of a human intellect coming down in this evil form and being our downfall.
But disguising themselves as us.
Yeah.
Right. And in Corinthians 11:14, King James Version says, and no marvel, for Satan himself is transformed into an angel of light. So they can look however beautiful or ugly they want to, if that's what they can look like.
You know, just like humans.
Yeah.
And if John Connor is going to be the one to defeat Skynet and, you know, pretty much save the world, in the Bible, there's also sections that talk about what, you know, the Messiah is going to do when he comes back on the cloud to particular nations around. So Skynet itself, in this, if Sarah's the mother, then Skynet would be like the Muslim nation. And I guess some of the men that she starts talking about who build warfare, and that's where their mind's at, is constantly fighting and not using it to really create life, which we're going to talk about later. This is what Jesus would do. You know, in Isaiah's chapters 13 through 23, it describes his final clash with the Antichrist. And in those chapters, it's the prophetic oracles and the burdens that are directed towards the Muslim nations, being Babylon, which is now Iraq, Assyria and the Philistines, Palestine, modern day, and Moab is Jordan, Damascus, Syria, Cush, which is near the Red Sea, Egypt, Edom, which is below the Dead Sea and in between the Red Sea, and Tyre, which is in Lebanon. It says that, like, in Egypt, the rivers are going to dry up and turn to pitch, and everything's going to be, like, essentially blasted away. Those are all Muslim nations now, today.
It's interesting you bring up Babylon, because before Sarah meets Reese, she has this one friend. It's Pugsley, her lizard.
Huh.
We discussed earlier how she's the mother of abominations, and of course, the woman with the dragon is a symbol of Babylon from Revelations as well. So,
Or the strength card, right?
yes. But if you'd like to hear more about Sarah Connor, John Connor, and their lizard Pugsley, please visit www.patreon.com/thewholerabbit, where your monthly donation of just $5 will get you access to our entire library of extended episodes, a 5x5 vinyl sticker of our cover art sent to you at no additional cost, and access to our Discord server, which is like the lunchroom at Skynet, but filled with weirdos. Thank you, everybody. Eat carrots and shoot lasers.